Good afternoon, Mr. Connell. Our witness for the afternoon is
Mr. Jonathan Best.
Mr. Best. Good afternoon, Mr. Best. I'm sorry we're starting a little later than was probably advised to you. It was by reason of the time taken in the morning. Now, as you appreciate, you're about to be asked questions by Mr. Connell, who's sitting opposite you. But first, I understand you've agreed to take the oath.
Yes.
Sitting where you are, can I ask you to raise your right hand? Repeat these words after me. I swear by Almighty God.
I swear by Almighty God.
That I will tell the truth.
That I will tell the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Thank you, Mr. Best. Now, I don't know how long your evidence will take. You've been scheduled for the afternoon. But if at any stage you want to take a break, please feel free just to give an indication and we can take a break. Now, Mr. Connell.
Thank you, my Lord. I have quite a few questions for you, Mr. Best, and also I have questions that have been suggested to me by other parties that I need to put to you, and there may be some more later on. First of all, the formal question, you've produced a witness statement. Are you content to adopt that as part of your evidence?
I am.
Thank you. And then the next question is this. Have you done your best to assist the inquiry by answering the questions as fully as possible?
I have.
And can I take it the choice of words is your choice of words?
They are, yes.
Thank you. Now, I'm going to use the witness statement as a sort of guide to topics and where we've got to. Not always in a logical, chronological order, but nevertheless, that's what we'll do. On the first page of your witness statement, which is on page 135 of the witness bundle, I see you set out the post you held, perhaps most significantly for our purposes, either COO or interim COO.
Yes.
From a date in 2016. And then you asked, well, what did that mean? And you said basically you were responsible for all the acute services,
Yes.
reporting directly to the chief executive. Is that
Yes,
right?
that's correct.
Now, just in light of, sorry, let me restart that question. I'm not going to ask you about everything in the witness statement. We have the witness statement and we can all read what's said. But I do want to ask you one or two things. If we go on to page 136, now in question 3, you're asked what I suspect is not a very good question because it's got a lot of bits to it. One of which is focused on the procurement of the hospital, to which your answer is, I wasn't involved in the procurement process for the new hospital.
Yes.
Now, there are a whole series of other questions and asked in question 3. And as far as I can see, apart from a brief reference to project management team being responsible for procurement, the rest of it is answered by a single sentence at the bottom. Any changes or issues would be taken through the appropriate governance group as noted in the published structure. Now,
Yes.
it might be suggested to you that that's not a particularly helpful statement put in that way. Do you see the point?
I do see the point, yes.
If I go on to 137, and this arises from something that we were touching on with other witnesses very recently. You asked about informal or formal meetings out with the structures, and what you mention is the project team establishing a governance/meeting structure which reported into the board governance structure as published.
Yes.
Now, two questions about that. Is that something from within your own knowledge, if you weren't involved in the procurement, or is it something that's simply been reported to you?
No, it'd be general knowledge from at the time, because of being in a different role, papers would be published, structures would be agreed through the board process. So, for example, I recall there are or there were proposals about the project governance structure with various organograms, which would have needed to be approved by the board's governance arrangements, and they would be pretty common knowledge to all the directors, those who were less involved and those who were heavily involved within the new hospital project.
The reason I ask is that we've seen the organograms, and I'm not going to unearth them again for us, but one of the issues that did arise is there was a box marked project team, and there didn't seem to be any formal minuting process like is sometimes found in other structures where, you know, Group A meets, minutes are produced, and then they're passed on up the line. And you were very dependent on what the project director told anybody in some form. Now, do you know anything about that or not?
I don't think so, because I think up until I was the chief executive at York Hill and then moved to director of regional services. And I think the only service that we were moving was the renal service from the Western Infirmary into the new hospital. So I would have limited involvement in some of the bigger issues around structures and meetings, etc. But I would have been involved in some. But I would have expected minutes to be taken.
Again, it's quite often easy to blame a poor question. If we look further down that page, question 7, what procedures were put in place with the board to ensure monitoring progress and resolution of issues related to the list of topics had taken place? And you say, well, all progress was reported through the agreed system. Now, it probably doesn't tell us very much about how the system operated to make sure that matters were resolved once they'd been raised. Again, do you see my point?
I do see your point, yes, and I would have expected anything of significance to go through the agreed project structure to the management structure, and if there was something that required a board either knowledge or decision, that would then go to a formal public board meeting or a private session of the board, should there be any commercial sensitive information involved.
At the foot of page 137, again, I suspect the drafting is deficient. Basically, what the questioner is trying to find out is when you were told that a decision had been taken, if you ever were told the decision had been taken to build this hospital with air change rates that didn't match government guidance. Now, your answer to the question as put was, well, I wasn't involved in the procurement process, but were you told about that at some point?
No.
Not at all, even when you're chief operating officer?
I think my first involvement in air changes and issues were when problems arose later on in my career.
What time would that be?
Going back to my roles and remits, there's a bit you'll see when I was interim chief operating officer or chief
Beginning
officer.
in 2016.
Yes, and it was a slightly complex issue because the then chief operating officer had several long periods of absence due to illness, and then I was asked to step in on several occasions. And so during these occasions, I would be picking up issues and picking up problems that had to be dealt with that would have been part of that person's remit.
So going back to the question, when did you first learn about?
So probably when I was in that interim role.
From sometime in 1916?
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Cullen.
No, if I go on to the next section of your witness statement, which started on 138, you were being asked, as were a lot of witnesses, about the commissioning of the building and validation and so on. And you pointed out that at the time, given your position, you weren't directly involved in that process. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So that we come to the top of 139. Now, what you're asked there is the inquiry understands no validation was carried out in respect to the ventilation system. When did you become aware of this? And then how did handover come to be accepted without it? Who was responsible for this? Now, you say, well, it's not part of my remit.
Yes.
Now, I think one can readily understand, Mr. Best, you're not there at the time of commissioning. So it's not your job to go round and check if validation has been done. But given the issues that started to emerge, which you must have started to become aware of at least in sometime in 2016 onwards, did you learn that validation hadn't been done?
I probably did when I picked issues up. And just to be clear, it was late 2016. I was at the Royal Infirmary from 15 to late 16, and early 17 began to take on the role of interim. So I would have picked these things up as they emerged.
Yeah, the reason I wanted to ask about it was that, on views no doubt can differ, but on one view, not doing the validation at all was a significant issue, and one that some might suggest you, as either interim or otherwise chief operating officer, would want to get to the bottom of. Did you manage to do that?
Not personally, no, because at the time I would expect the project director and those with technical and those charged with the commissioning and validation to be reviewing what has happened and reporting into the management process to see what went wrong or if anything went wrong.
Well,
I would be part of that
I can
management.
understand you're not doing it.
Yes.
You're not the guy who's
Yes.
digging through the paperwork to see if it's
Yes.
happened. But as chief operating officer, is it not the kind of thing that you want to know? Well, what have you found? What's the answer?
Absolutely.
And did you do that?
I can't recall the detail, but I would have participated in discussions, updates and meetings about that, and given the importance of maintaining patient safety and patient services during that time.
With whom did you have these discussions?
Well, there'd be normal discussions in management meetings, information provided to the operational side of the service. If they're moving into an area or something had gone wrong with an area, might be part of the snagging, etc. So everyone worked pretty closely together on these things on an operational side.
Do you have a recollection of discussing this specific matter, that's the absence of validation of the ventilation system, with anyone?
No.
A recollection?
No.
I mean, it is understandable after some time that you may not recollect things. If you can't recollect things, please tell us.
Yes.
Probably well illustrated by the next question, Mr. Best, because if you can't remember something, or you can remember it only generally but not in detail, we need to understand that to understand your answers. Because in the next, you then asked another question about handover. Now, of course, you're telling us that you weren't the person in charge at the time of the handover of the building, which took place in January 2015 with occupation in the months following that. So you asked, well, how were you satisfied that everything was as it should be to accept the cohorts of patients? Now, your answer is the project management team, along with relevant clinical and technical staff, worked with operational staff to ensure areas being handed over were ready for occupation. Now, in giving that answer, would I take it from your previous answers that you're simply suggesting how it should have been done, not how you know it was done?
That's correct. And in previous experience, all the relevant specialists, technical, clinical, etc., would work together to a point where an area, a ward, the department was declared fit for occupation and then handed over to the operational team to stock the ward, to staff the area, and then there would be an agreed time for that to become operational and accept patients. That was or I think is the standard way that we would be operating within the NHS certainly when I was in post.
You do understand Mr. Connell's question. There's a distinction between what should be done
Yes.
and what might have been done.
Absolutely. Yes.
So you just so I'm absolutely clear, you have put that answer in on an assumption that what you thought would normally be done was being done.
Yeah, and based on my previous experience in other roles.
If we go further down that page to the foot, you ask about HAI scribe. Now, first of all, are you familiar with that concept?
I am, yes.
And the question was high scribe assessment carried out at any point regarding site development, design, planning, construction of the new hospital? If not, why not? Now, your answer to that is this would be the responsibility of ICT colleagues together with the project team. To which the question might be, well, yes, we probably know that you wouldn't personally be involved in doing it. Do you know if high scribe assessments were done at any stage?
I don't personally know, but I would have expected it to be done.
Slightly, this may be really taking too much from the words you've used, but do you mean quite literally that the responsibility for carrying out high scribes is that of ICT colleagues?
Perhaps not a good choice of words, my lord. I think there would be a team of people led probably by the ICT team working on that particular issue and producing what was required under the standard formats.
I mean, if one looks at the relevant documentation, the emphasis seems to be on a project team bringing together a number of disciplines.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
However, the inquiry has heard evidence that on occasions, not necessarily just in Glasgow, it has been seen as an infection prevention and control responsibility. Now, on a literal reading of your answer, that might suggest that that was your view, but was that your view or was that not your view?
I suppose the wording is careless and should read coordinated by ICT colleagues, because they alone could not do that. They would need operational colleagues, they would need other technical colleagues to feed into the standard documentation, which I don't have knowledge of the standard documentation.
I mean, the IPC colleagues might have to be advised at what stage a construction project had reached.
Yes.
Yes. Sorry, Mr. Corrin.
I'd like to turn to a discrete topic which has, I'm afraid, moved under our feet in the last few days, given some other evidence that we've had, and that's the move of the bone marrow transplant unit from the Beats into the new hospital and everything that happened about that. And just taking this very generally, the issue of why they'd moved in, had to move out, whether they're going to move back in again, was live over a considerable period, including the period when you were COO in one form or another. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. Well, let's see if we can take this in sequence and understand what you know or don't know about it. First of all, the decision that it was to happen at all, that the bone marrow transplant unit was to be put into the new hospital. No one suggests that was your decision. We know there was a lot of discussion about it and a decision was finally reached.
Yeah.
So I don't need to worry about that point. What I would like to ask you about, first of all, is the change order request that you signed. So if we could have bundle 16, page 1699, please. Now, I don't think there's any issue that this is a document that you signed on the 9th of July 2013. Can I ask you, first of all, what did you understand the purpose of this document was?
So, if I can go back a wee bit to
Please answer the question as you think fit.
Thank you. To the genesis of getting to this point. So, at the time of the build of the new hospital, within the bone marrow transplant service, there were a number of national and local and regional issues going on. So National Services Division, who commission services from boards, NSD as we call them, they had an ongoing review of bone marrow transplant and donor cell services. And there are minutes, and our staff from GGC, particularly the Regional Services Directorate, who hosted bone marrow, participated in that review. And that review, I think there should be minutes from that, from National Services Division from around 2013 at some point. I don't have access to systems since I retired, so I've been trying to figure this out in the last couple of days. So in one respect, there was a national review going on. And then within Glasgow, at that point, regional services were only transferring the renal service, the renal transplant service, over to join hemato-oncology on the 4th floor of the new hospital. But also at the same time, there was new accreditation work and new accreditation standards being developed by something called JC accreditation. Now, I can't remember what JC stands for, apologies.
Yeah.
But
it's
again,
all right. We've had those initials
Thank
on
you.
a number of occasions.
Yeah, right.
I can't remember either,
Yeah.
but it doesn't matter for present purposes. Carry on.
So I believe there was work on national standards in 2012-13, where the new standards were coming in for all health boards. And that would mean that if you're providing bone marrow transplant hemato-oncology services, you needed to be near an intensive care unit and various other services that are required for those very specialist and high-risk services. So that was going on at that time. And also at that time, the clinicians were concerned with the fact that services were moving to the new hospital, that there was new accreditation requirements, and that they were trying to provide a service, and there was only a high dependency unit within the Gart Naval Complex. So all of those things combined led to a briefing paper being produced, I think around June 2013, within the Regional Services Directorate or Division, which was set out all these issues. And then I believe the issue was then taken through what they call the On the Move Programme Board. And the On the Move Programme Board was obviously for the move to the new hospital. And there was various things like the bed planning was taken there, etc., etc. Now, there was quite a big paper taken there, which, if I can recall, described all the different services, acute services that were moving from various sites to the new hospital, where they would go, where they would sit, bed numbers, etc. And I believe the bone marrow transplant proposal to move was included in that paper and therefore approved, which led to the change document being signed, which would then be submitted in through the project team to go through their process of any changes to the facility.
Okay. Well, thank you for that answer. We have got a lot of material on the discussion of the reasoning behind the move. I think what I was just keen to understand was perhaps the last part of your answer. When you signed this, what did you think you were doing by signing it? What was the purpose of signing this document?
Well, the purpose was that clearly this was not intended to be transferred initially to the new hospital. So therefore, there's an agreed change control procedure. And if there are any associated costs or any changes that require further discussion or planning, then this was the starting point. So after that, the detail would then have to be done, the work between the service and the project team and the contractor to then provide the final planning and all the associated risk assessments, etc., to then create the service that was required.
So if we just try and get the timing, you're sitting somewhere, someone says, okay to sign this, you go, yes, you sign it. Where did you think it was going?
Well, I think I didn't just say it's okay to sign it. I think we had
No.
all the previous documentation that I've described, and there was also some very detailed discussions and involvement with the clinicians involved. And Dr. Jennifer Armstrong actually met with them, and there was some briefing papers prepared round about clinical risk, etc. So all of that together and through the governance process being approved, then led to submitting as other things. So, for example, I think, if I remember correctly, that the infectious diseases service moved to the new hospital wasn't originally planned to move, but would have had to have a similar directorate change control form signed to then go to the next stage of that planning or any change to the costs, etc.
Okay, let me just try again. Once you put your signature on
Yes.
this document, because this seems that this is what they would now call a wet signature, I think. What was the next step in this document journey, as far as you understood? Who did it go to from you?
Well, I'd assume that the project team in their regular meetings with the contractor, now I don't know, I've not seen any of these regular meetings, would have had regular discussions about any changes that are happening to the project as the hospital was built, or if things were built, what that meant for the changes. And then similarly within the operational side, then the team would then make the necessary planning arrangements, work with the hospital project to produce the final requirements. So this was the authorisation to move to the next stage.
Okay, I understand that answer entirely as a matter of principle, Mr. Best, that you see this as the start of a process.
Yes.
And we've had.
Well, can I take a step backward? My understanding of the timescale is that Dr. Armstrong and Ms. Grant made a presentation to the GDC board in relation to this proposal and got the agreement of the board to locate what was a national service in the Queen Elizabeth. Have I got that step right?
So,
or am I wrong?
No.
Sorry, Mr. Connell. I just so that I understand the
Yeah.
time scale.
You're not wrong, but there was so.
I mean, tell me if I am.
It was the national part of the bone marrow service, the donor matching part, which was national. There was still regional transplantation and hemato-oncology as part of this package going over, and I think it was from B7, or I can't remember the exact words in the Beatson. But yes, this was mainly the national programme that was going to be located there, but with some of our regional programme as well.
I'm grateful for that correction.
Yeah.
And the reason that your signature appears in this document is that at that time you were the regional director,
Yes.
and therefore responsible,
Yes.
as I would understand
Yes.
it,
Yes.
for services that GGC was providing beyond its own borders,
Yes.
both regionally and nationally.
Yes. Yes.
So this was about the relocation of a service which you were responsible for.
Yes.
Right. Mr. Cole?
Just if I can pause on this document for a moment. I can see in one sense why there's a section headed business justification, although on one view that's no interest to the contractor or the project team. They only know what they're being asked to do. And one can see there business justification, one, to move national unrelated donor bone marrow transplant program and regional related donor program and potentially another one, and then to meet accreditation standards. which are the kind of things that you've touched upon. So who drafted this document? Did you draft it?
No, I think it was probably be drafted by the planning manager for regional services.
Right. Well, the next question I have really focuses on what's above the words business justification, because obviously you've got, as a regional service, considerable experience in the Beatson of, for instance, the kind of environment that you need to protect the vulnerable patients, the specifics of that, the every detail, which no doubt was gone over in the Beatson. Now, do you know if thought was given to recording the protective environment requirements on this document?
I don't think so. I would probably think that would be further detail that would need to be either produced or worked up based on what we had at the Beatson and what we were moving to. So I think the Directorate Change Control procedure was a fairly standard form at the time that was used for many things. So I presume that's why there is not a lot of detail on this. It's the high level issues.
That's what I was going to ask you about. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your answer there, but if you look, there's a thing that says description of change, and then a further description, then a series of numbers. Could we just expand that a little bit?
Yep.
For me as much as anybody else. Now, one can understand if this form had said, we're moving the BMT unit, it's going in space X, details to be discussed or worked up or covered by design. But in fact, you get everything here from form a breakthrough at wheelchair bay, add hold open fire door, 2 further fire doors, and so on, which doesn't, at least on the face of it, match the notion that this was a general start of a process with details to be worked out. It looks as if there's a whole list of almost fairly minor details listed there. Do you see the point I'm making?
No, absolutely see the point, yes.
Did you understand the point at the time you were signing the form?
I can't recall specifically questioning any detail, but having looked and been aware of all the more strategic papers towards this, this is where it came to, and probably some of the planning team might have added some of the detail in there, but I can't hand on heart say that I questioned that particular or those particular minor issues at the time.
My fault, because I interrupted Mr. Connell. Did you answer the question, or where you asked the question? Where does this form go after you sign it?
I'm not sure where it went, my lord, but I would assume that this would go through the, if it's been presented to the board and approved, and if it's gone through the On the Move project steering board, then it would be handed over to the project team to work with the contractors, and then we would bring the operational team in to work on the detail. Well, I'm not quite sure. I can't honestly say that I knew or can remember the process of where the change forms went to.
Right. That does raise the question, are you signing a document that you don't know its function?
No, I knew its function. What I'm saying, I can't remember where
precisely it went.
Which part of the governance structure it went to next.
Right. Without any background information, and I'll be corrected if I'm wrong about this, this might be a 2-stage document, and the first stage is seeking financial approval internally within the GDC structure. And that approval having been given, it is then or maybe sent to the contractor. Now, I may be entirely misconstruing this document, but that would be my reading. I don't think that, and that may not be a universal reading, but can you help me with this?
So I think two further points to that. Firstly, and it's a minor point in terms of the financial side of it, because it's a national service, National Services Division, NSD would be involved because they provide the funding via all the health boards on a proportional basis of use for the national service on an ongoing basis. So that part of the funding would be from other boards, part would be from GGC. Apologies.
No, that's useful because I think up to this point I'd rather assumed that it was, as it were, request for funding to which would have to be met by GDC. But
right. Yes.
You correct me on that.
And just to conclude that, my lord, the National Service Division would have an oversight of the service and would monitor standards, monitor performance, etc. And we would meet with them on a regular basis and with other boards about that.
Oh, I wonder if I can just ask a question about this.
Mr. Connell, maybe I should just hand back to you. As I say, just well, I'll hand back.
Okay, you. I suppose one of the questions I was going to ask you, Mr. Best, was okay. So a lot of talk has taken place. A decision has been made. You know, the justification of the decision's all been laid out. You're asked to sign a form that you think one of the planners has probably filled up. What did you then do to ensure that this possibly quite important change was properly done?
Well, the team at the Beatson then would hopefully work with the project team and the contractors to bring together all the detailed planning and then start the process of trying to build up what was required to move the service in to make sure it was safe and functioning well.
Okay, can I just come back to the question again? I understand you think the team should be doing things, but were you doing anything? Were you following up, pursuing this at all? Or?
Well, I'd be receiving regular reports from the general manager at the Beatson. I would be, be in discussion with colleagues. I would be there would be reports back to the Regional Services Division, etc. So there should be, I would hope, minutes and other things on file on regular progress on this.
Right. One of the challenges we have, and this is obviously we're looking back a fair old way now, is that if you read the piece of paper we have in front of us, just as it stands, what it says is changes to hemato-oncology and renal. It's what we're now calling 4B, and the 2 isolation rooms in the renal high dependency area. And there's a list.
Yeah.
So on the face of it, it appears to be intended to be a communication saying, please make these changes in this area. Do you agree?
I can understand why it appears like that with one form, but there was a whole lot of, as I described, previous papers, previous analysis, options, appraisals, various things undertaken to get to this point. So perhaps having one single form doesn't tell the whole story round about it, because it's not just done in isolation.
Well, no, I understand what precedes the form.
Yeah.
I suppose what we're trying to get to is if for the sake of argument you're right, and this is then handed to a firm of contractors, here's a form signed by our Director of Regional Services, description of change list. At least on the face of the form, it doesn't ask them to do anything else.
No, I can see that. However, those with the operational responsibility would then work with the the project team and the contractor on the detail to work up where they need what they needed to do. So it would have been hopefully a continuous process.
May I could ask you, because you may have the advantage of us, have you ever seen a document subsequent to this, but relating to the move of the BMT unit, which spells out all these further details that you think should have been worked out?
I haven't had access to any.
We haven't found one.
Yeah.
That's why I'm asking, just
Right.
in case you remembered its existence, even if you hadn't remembered seeing it.
But one comment I would make is that Gary Jenkins, who was the general manager at the time, is an exceptionally detailed individual, and I would assume or presume there would be notes and there would be correspondence available from the GGC system regarding the subsequent detailed work that was done. I'm absolutely sure of that.
Okay, well, I'm going to come to Mr. Jenkins just in a minute because I'm
Yes.
trying to understand what you do or don't know. Just to do the sequence, can I go back 2 pages in this bundle to 1697? Now, this is not a document with your signature on it. You may not even have seen it before. Do you know?
Was it in the bundle?
Probably.
Yeah. I may have read it, yes.
Yeah. Now, this is what's called a project manager instruction, which you can just take from me as a means by which the employer under the contract communicates to the contractor that the project manager has decided something, and this is what the decision is. And it says, further to the drawings and information previously provided by Heather Griffin, who was the assistant project manager in charge of the adult hospital, identifying changes to NSGH level 4, the board request. Then it says, stop what you're doing, tell us how far you've got, and then go and talk about the detail of the design. So far that matches what you thought would be happening. And the date of that document, well, actually, it's dated the 2nd of July, which isn't entirely consistent with your change form, particularly since it says that detailed meetings can commence on the 8th of July, but let's leave that for the moment. I mean, you'll appreciate why I'm delaying a little bit the BMT unit, because it became quite a big issue later on. Now, what we, for the first time, have been able to add to this is, as you say, Mr. Jenkins, the detail man that you mentioned. Now, he told us earlier this week that what then happened was that whether you gave him the document or somebody gave him the change order, he knew more detail was needed. And he, together with the lead consultant and his manager, went to see the project team chaired by Heather Griffin. And he told us that he went through all the special requirements of the BMT unit, the air change rates, the pressure gradients, the need for sealed rooms, HEPA filtration, how it wasn't just the same as a hemato-oncology ward, wasn't just a neutropenic ward, it was different. And he went all over that over a series of about 5 meetings. Now, that would accord, if I understand it correctly, with what you thought should have happened.
Yes.
Have you ever seen any output from these discussions in any written form anywhere?
No, not that I can remember.
What Mr. Jenkins told us was that he and his colleagues were quite satisfied that they'd laid this all out in clear terms, and they'd had nobody saying to them, no, you can't do that, what you're talking about, you've got that wrong, or any such thing. It's all no pushback, if I can use that colloquialism for the moment. And therefore, when problems arose with the Beatson, which I accept initially arose when you were in another post, yes. He was, and I suspect he was carefully selecting a suitably calm word, he was perplexed when it appeared that things weren't as he had anticipated. Now, he told us that he explained his puzzlement to various people, including you. Do you remember that?
I can't remember the details precisely, but I do remember that Gary Jenkins was concerned and raised the matter through the various managerial lines.
The reason I ask is quite simple, because taking it as read for the moment that the whole issue of what had or had not happened with this unit and what should happen with it remained live for some years. Mm-hmm. Can we take this off the screen now? Thanks. On the face of it, if Mr. Jenkins and his colleagues, just assume that the narrative he's given us is correct, if that's correct, and he lays this all out for the project team, there are presumably a number of possibilities. One, he was somehow not getting his message across, or their message across, and they just didn't understand what he was asking for. Two, they just didn't pass it on to the contractor, or I suppose three, they passed it on to the contractor and the contractor didn't do what they were asked to do. These are the kind of possibilities that might arise. Do you agree?
Yes.
Once you're back as interim, back in this hospital as interim COO, did you get to the bottom of that?
I don't think we ever did. I can't remember any further detailed meetings about it, because I think by that time the BMT service had moved back. I can't quite remember the dates there, but I would have to see any meetings or any papers that pertain to that particular problem.
Well, I think what we have got papers about the options for the BMT unit, what was described as an options appraisal.
Yes.
But that was in 2017. No decisions were taken until after that. So do you know what steps were taken to find out what had happened to what might have been Mr. Jenkins and his team's clear identification of what was required?
I don't.
And why not?
Partly because I'm unable to recall that far back, but I would need to look at any meetings or minutes there were with the project team, with the contractor. I assume they all exist, and this issue was raised.
I suppose I just have to suggest to you that in your role, if you discovered, for instance, that take a silly example, Heather Griffin had written it all down and then lost her notes, or forgotten to give it to the contractor, or told you that they'd definitely given it to the contractor at a meeting, would you not remember?
I mean, that example's very pertinent, but I had not, or I have not seen anything about this being discussed. There would be lots of discussion about it, because obviously I'd be keeping in touch with all my direct reports in terms of what their issues were. But no, I agree with your example.
I'm just asking because it seems a little odd, because you've got possibilities there ranging from, oh, here's a good case to sue somebody, to here's a good case to fire somebody, depending on how it all played out. And we don't know, but you were the COO, so should you not know?
I would know all about it, given the clinical service we've got to provide and the national service we've got to provide. But I would be expecting, if there's been some sort of error or something happened within a project department, that there would be a mechanism with the project team, the project director, the director of estates, others, to tell us what has happened.
Yeah, well, one can see that. And it might not have been for Miss Griffin to explain it. It might have been for whoever was her immediate supervisor,
Yes.
someone like Mr. Loudon, to explain it. But would it not be an explanation that would come to you?
I would hope so.
And did it?
I don't recall receiving an explanation.
I'll move on to some other questions, if I may. Do you know if a high scribe should have been done for this alteration to the plans for the new hospital?
The BMT plan,
Yes.
that would have been done as part of the work with the management team with Dr. Parker. I think it was Dr. Parker who was the lead clinician, would be the lead nurse, the service manager, and if they were having these meetings with Heather Griffin and the team, then they would put a package together, which would probably have the high scribe and bringing in any relevant clinical experts or infection control experts to help them. But that team would be tasked with putting that package together for the move, which would include things like the financial side, the staffing side, the risk side, etc., etc. That would be their operational responsibility.
Do you know whether it was done, or are you just saying you think that's what should have been done?
I haven't seen the detail, but I would hope it would have been done, because that was a standard piece of work that would go with any of these moves.
I should have asked you this earlier. One of the things Mr. Jenkins told us was that one of the steps they took when they were in these meetings was there were various drawings that they looked at, and notes were made on these drawings about various of their requirements, and they all signed them. And then when things didn't go as planned in 2015, as he graphically put it, a decision being made to leave the new building on the same day the Queen was opening it, he was sort of thinking to himself, I did that, didn't I? And went and spoke to, as you say, Dr. Parker and Myra Marshall, who both said, yes, we did that. So he then said, well, that's all right, I'll call up these drawings we signed. Now, do you remember being told that he then found that these drawings had been destroyed, apparently due to lack of space?
I don't recall being told that, but I do agree that the standard procedure at the time, and I remember this from the Reno move, that the teams involved would sign the drawings as they stepped through the detail of what a ward or department would look like. So I have every confidence that the team involved did undertake their responsibility and sign the drawings. That is news to me, that documents were destroyed.
The reason we asked Mr. Jenkins was we were looking to see if we could find them,
Yes.
for obvious reasons. Because I think I can tell you that we haven't found any documents which record the requirements that Mr. Jenkins and his team apparently laid out. And it then starts to become important, because you remember that one of the issues was the number of air change rates that could be provided. Now, Mr. Jenkins says, well, no one told me there was a problem. So when he was having his exchanges with the project team. Now on page 141 of your witness statement, we just come back there. There's a letter H there about a third of the way down. Question, were you told by anyone that the ventilation system already planned for the hospital would not be able to provide 10 air changes per hour within the proposed 10 adult ward? Now, Mr. Jenkins thought it should be 10 to 12, but that distinction doesn't matter for present purposes. Now, in response to the question of whether you were told, you say any issues would have been raised through the project management structure and discussed at relevant governance meetings, which is perhaps not, again, the most helpful answer to, well, were you told about it?
I would only have been told about it if a problem arose, as we previously discussed.
Yes.
In a large complex organisation, we would anticipate that those who had the responsibility for technical, for ventilation, would be providing the operational team with the relevant advice, so that the area could meet all the regulations.
Okay. So, just, I need to put that answer in context, if I
Yes.
may. You sign the order, you think it may go to the contractor, but you understand your team should be getting in touch. And that's what Mr. Jenkins said he did.
Yep.
To lay it all out. Were you ever...
Well, sorry, I may be making unnecessary difficulty. The question takes the witness to his assumption that the document would go to the contractor. There's the qualification that he would expect those with operational responsibility to take it forward. We've heard evidence about that, but those with operational responsibility, I don't think, or according to Mr. Jenkins, I don't think he said he took it to the contractor. Now, I may be making a difficulty which doesn't exist.
No, all I'm trying to get at in terms of context to your answer is, you're the person who signs the form.
Yes.
The form you think may be intended to go to the contractor via the project team or to the project team to progress. You're not sure about that. You understand that people beneath you in the system, like Mr. Jenkins, are to have discussions with the project team to lay down the requirements. And that's what we've been told happened. Now, Mr. Jenkins says no one said to him there was a problem over air change rate. So I'm just trying to find out if you have any recollection of being told there was a problem over air change rates.
No, I wasn't told there was any problem. And apologies for maybe too vague an answer, but I suppose in two levels. One is if there's a massive project such as the Queen Elizabeth Children's Hospital, etc., at that level there would be expertise working on ventilation systems, etc. And then what I'm probably not saying very well is if there was a local issue such as the change that we were going to make, we would expect that expertise through the project team to be brought to bear and give us the assurance that if we are designing a ward, then the facilities can cope with that. Maybe not describing that very well.
No, I think I've got that.
Yes.
But can I take the opportunity to invite you to explain what expertise you thought was available to GGC at that point, 2013, in relation to the technicalities associated with the ventilation system?
So in my mind, there would be two types of expertise. There would be the expertise that the contractor appointed would have either subcontracted or have within their teams, providing the ventilation system or whatever. And then there would be our local estates teams with the knowledge of hospitals who could give advice who give advice on a day-to-day basis, say if there's an issue with a ward or a department. So that's the kind of expertise I would assume, because we would have typically clinician, nurse, manager and others pulling together the operational side with support from infection control, microbiology, all the different expertise to get to the point where we've got a safe, suitable area or ward for patients to be accommodated in.
Were you making any assumption as to the expertise available to the project team other than the local estates team and what you describe as the operational team?
No, I would expect the liaison between the local technical teams and the teams that the contractors had to build it would be taking place, and that we would benefit from that expertise.
Sorry, Mr. Conlon.
Thank you, Lord. Can I just ask you another consequential question, still just sort of linked into this? The area where the bone marrow transplant unit was intended to go, what we've just for ease called 4B,
Yes.
was previously intended to be occupied by a hemato-oncology ward. Now, we asked Mr. Jenkins about this, because obviously he'd been involved with cancer treatments. And he was able to assist us by telling us that the cohort intended for Ward 4B before the BMT proposal was one from the southern,
Yes.
a ward which was similar to a ward in the Beatson that wasn't going anywhere,
Yes.
hemato-oncology ward. And I think he was asked to look at the clinical output specification, which is part of the structure used to create the employer's requirements, which are part of the contract, which spelled out a lot of requirements for that ward, a lot of ventilation requirements, talk of chemotherapy in immunocompromised patients. Now, first of all, do you have any knowledge of that?
I wouldn't have any knowledge of the original plan to move haematology in, because that was under the South Directorate, and they would be participating in that. We had previous experience in when the Beatson was commissioned previous years, so therefore the local team there would have good knowledge of that and would be able to liaise with people and have that knowledge when any plans were being made.
Well, it may be that you can't assist us then, because one of the fairly obvious things that happened here was that decision was made, BMT into 4B, discussions about what we want. What's going to happen to the people that were scheduled to go into 4B? They're going to 4C. On the face of it, that then creates a requirement for what Mr. Jenkins at least described as a neutropenic ward under the guidance. Do you know anything about what steps were taken to arrange for an appropriate environment in 4C?
No, I don't.
Is that because that wasn't part of your responsibility?
Yes.
I don't have too much more on 4B because we may have done it to death, but can we go to 143 in your witness statement? Again, it's probably the way you framed the answer I just want to ask about. And there is an error in the date in question F, obviously. Now you're asked, how did you ensure that when the 4B people were going to arrive, everything was ready for them effectively?
Yeah.
And you say, well, the date's wrong. And then you say, well, before any move of patients to new wards or departments, a range of assurances would be provided by the project team along with clinical estates, ICT colleagues working with the operation team. Is that another answer which is not based on your personal knowledge, but what you assume would have happened based on previous experience?
Previous experience, definitely, yes. Standard procedure when a new ward or department opens, there's a range of things happen, such as microbiological testing, deep cleaning, testing of electrical points, etc. It's a well-known procedure within the NHS for an operational occupation of a ward.
Now, I'll just ask you one final question about this. We know there was a lot of debate ultimately about what to do about the BMT unit.
Yes.
Should it go somewhere else? Should you
Yes.
build a new floor? All these other options. Maybe I've asked you this already, but I'll ask you it in any event. Did you ever get to the bottom of how you got into that unfortunate situation? I'm about to say mess, but perhaps unfortunate situation is a politer term, whereby you had this unit turn up and then basically say, we're not staying here, we're going back to the Beatson, which I think most people have regarded as almost unprecedented.
Well, I think all the points that have been touched upon regarding air changes, etc., are very pertinent. But at the same time, a number of other issues regarding that we're going on. And the principal one for us at any time is patient safety, and the patient safety angle, and it may appear, as you've described it, as a mess, but ensuring patient safety, if it meant moving a ward back, it meant then mustering everyone to move a ward back. And I think that for me, over and above everything else, that's the most important thing. Did we get to the bottom of it? Well, partly I think, as you've described in terms of what happened with air changes, etc., and you've described what happened with us designing that. But no, we did. I don't think I got to the bottom of what actually happened with plans, etc.
No, I wasn't intending to criticise the move. I was simply intending to point out that on the face of it, it should never have happened. And you just didn't get to the bottom of that.
No, we didn't.
Okay, let me ask you about something else. 145, please. The DMA Canyon report.
Yes.
Now, you asked when you first became aware of them, and you say you weren't aware of the DMA report. That's the DMA 2015 report, until 2017/18.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us any closer indication of when you became aware of it?
So when it's correct, at the 2015 I was in a different role. So when I was asked to become interim chief officer, chief operating officer, I think it was during one of the periods of my colleague's illness. I found out from the board chief executive that the subsequent report, there was the first report, then there was a second report, that no action or little action had taken place. Chief executive took that very seriously, and as you know from some of the minutes, etc., a number of meetings were held, and the board chief executive was very keen and very prescriptive about making sure that we resolved the actions that were required. Now, there were a number of meetings, as you've seen from the bundles of papers. There was obviously clinical meetings led by the board medical director, Dr. Armstrong, but there was then the external review by Mr. Leaper, who is a recognised expert in these issues, and he produced his report, the external review report. The part that I became involved in was I attended some of these meetings. Partly in my role is there anything in the operational side we needed to do to support the fulfilling of the recommendations, because much of it was to do with estates and facilities, etc. And then the final bit I was involved in was when the chief executive asked myself, I think it was Mary Ann Kane, who was acting into the estates role at the time, Mr. Leaper, Tom Walsh from Infection Control, and I can't remember who else, to have almost a daily meeting first thing in the morning to look at ensuring that the actions had been implemented or were being implemented, because rightly so, Mrs. Grant picked up the report and was making sure that was done. And my role was to chair that small group towards the end of completing all the actions to make sure that the actions had all been taken and it satisfied the external team that were looking at it.
Okay, well, first of all, if you don't mind, can I just come back to where I started
Yes.
when I asked you this question is, I know there are lots of meetings and groups and actions, but can you help us at all by way of date of when you were first told about it?
I think it would be sometime in 2017. What I tried to find, but I couldn't find, and the team here might be able to find, is there should be regular updates on the action plan, and the dates will be in that when we started to try and finalise the action plan, I think in 2017. I don't have access to the documents, but I did mention to folks that there should be that. So there was an action grid based on the findings of the DMA report, and every morning we sat and went through them to make sure they were getting done, and then folk were tasked with going and checking what had happened.
Okay. I'll just add one further question to that. How did you come to first hear about it?
I was informed by the board chief executive.
Right. So whenever it was, that was your source?
Yes.
Did you know anything about it before then?
Well, I knew that the actual DMA report was common knowledge at that point, but I had not any detailed knowledge of it. And then Mrs. Grant obviously was very concerned, and I then received the detail and the instruction to make sure that the actions were all followed through.
Just so I have it for the notes, when you say prior to your communication with the chief executive, it was common knowledge. What was common knowledge?
Well, probably that this had been discovered.
You've explained to us some of the things that were done following unearthing of this report and the identification that steps that should have been done hadn't been done. And I don't want to ask you about that particularly, but can we go to 147? And again, this may arise from misconception as to your role, but if so, please tell me. You've gone through all the different steps that were being done on that page and previous page, and then you're asked near the footer, page 147, what insight did you gain into the reasons why recommendations were missed in the original report? To which your answer is, the report was the responsibility of estates and facilities. I'm not in a position to comment on details of why the recommendations were missed. Well, I think the question to you might be, well, why not? You're the chief operating officer.
Well, I suppose I'm not technically qualified with water or water engineering, etc. But if a task is there with actions, and I'm asked to do that, then I will gather the people to do that. So I suppose a clumsy way of saying is that in a senior management role, you may not have the detailed technical knowledge or qualifications, but you may be asked to chair a group to make sure that actions are implemented.
Well, I'm sure we understand your point about the technical qualifications of somebody in general management. But I think the suggestion that I'm being asked to put to you is that as chief operating officer, we're not talking about the technicalities of the water system. We're talking about what did or did not happen to a report which had been produced some considerable time earlier. Now, to say in your witness statement, I'm not in a position to comment on the details of why the recommendations were missed, it's perhaps not the answer we were expecting, if I can put it that way.
But I don't know why they were missed, because if there are ongoing water, for example, just now I presume there's still external people coming in to look at the water supply. I wouldn't, in a general management role, potentially see that or be responsible for that. That would be through estates and facilities, because I've got a large, complex organisation to run, If you see what I mean. Maybe it's a clumsy way of saying that was not in my remit. That was part of the state's facilities.
Well, but the states of the facilities hadn't successfully dealt with it, it appears. So did it not come up the line to you?
Well, no, the state's facilities director didn't report to the chief operating officer.
And you didn't have any responsibility to find out how this had gone wrong?
No, I think that there was various. I think there was various reviews and internal investigations, but that would have been commissioned through the director of the state's facilities, not within the chief operating officer role.
Let me move on, if I can. Little way to go yet. The next topic you were asked about was the decant of wards 2A and B, which was one of
Yes.
the steps that was ultimately taken in the issues that you faced. I'm not going to ask you about everything in that section because there's a lot of narrative there and we can see how you've answered them. Question 25 includes among its terms, why was it necessary to decant 2A and 2B? And what role did concerns that the water system posed a risk to safety play in that decision? Now, that's part of the question you asked. Your answer is, my understanding of the SBAR was to provide the situation report and proposed actions to ensure the safety of the patient cohort. The SBAR was used to assess the situation and inform decision-making. You haven't really told us there why it was necessary to decant, have you?
No, I mean, I think there's two things here, because the first part of the question indicates a briefing to the chairman, which the chairman's obviously entitled to get, and the standard form of briefing for some clinical issues, etc., would be an SBAR, and I believe it's used across the NHS and in Scotland and beyond. Why was a decant necessary? I think that's been well trailed, but I think the important thing is that the multidisciplinary approach to this is very important in something as big a decision as this, because there would be infection control, microbiology, nursing, but key to it would be the clinicians who are looking after the patients, because they're the ones who are responsible for that care, and they need to have a safe environment. And if they don't think it's a safe environment, we as a team together need to sit down and work out what's the best thing to do. And in this instance, the best thing to do is decant, to allow the investigations to take place as to why the ward was not suitable.
All that might be so, but do you provide in the statement an answer to question 25?
Perhaps my answer is not as you would wish, my lord, but I think
does it really engage the question at all?
Right. I apologise for that.
Mr. Conn?
Well, as you say, it's been trailed with a lot of other evidence, so I won't delay on that. Can I raise a similar question? Page 149. We're talking here about a point where Ward 6A, to which people had been decanted, was then closed to new admissions. And you're given reference to various points where that's recorded. Now, the first question that you're asked after the narrative there is, what knowledge did you have of that decision at the time in August 2019? First of all, have you answered that question?
Sorry,
With question 27.
Oh, sorry.
Question 27 on page 149. After the quote, the references to various documents, the minutes of the IMT, two questions. First question, what knowledge did you have of the decision at the time? Have you answered that question?
I think I've answered the question, but I would say I did have full knowledge of the issues at the time.
Okay. Do we see that in the answer to 27 that's recorded here?
Again,
You just say you were involved in the discussions, but that's where you say it, is it?
Yeah.
And the question is, why was it made, who made it, and who approved it? And you say, well, it would be taken after careful consideration based on clinical advice.
Yes.
Perhaps doesn't answer the question of who was the decision taker there.
So I suppose if a ward was to be closed to new admissions, if I give a simple example, because this is not a simple example because of the type of patients, if there's an outbreak of norovirus on a ward and infection control and advise us and the clinicians advise that the ward should be closed to new admissions, that would be done on a regular basis and probably taken at a level of general manager or with clinical advice through the chief of medicine and chief nurse. So there are various levels in terms of responsibilities for doing that, and there's standard procedures, and wards don't reopen until infection control and others are comfortable. In this case, there was multiple discussions regarding the patients with the clinical teams, and I think the consensus was reached amongst us that we had to close the ward to new admissions, and that is not a step that's taken very lightly, given the severity of the illness that's been dealt with.
Again, I can understand that it would be taken after careful consideration. When you were answering question 27, did you explain to us that this was a collegiate decision made by A, B, and C? Probably not.
Apologies if that didn't come across as clear.
And the next question you're asked about an IMT in August 2019 about a further decant, and there's a note suggesting that a final decision will be endorsed by the chief executive, and you've asked, well, does that mean that ultimately the decision is for the chief executive to make? Now, as I understand it, on page 150, you say it's not fair to assume that ward decants were decided by the chief executive, which perhaps isn't quite the same question, but and you go on to say, well, others worked together to reach a conclusion, but given the impact on the hospital and ongoing review of the environment, it was appropriate to seek senior sign-off by the chief executive. So ultimately, the decision would be his. Is that what you are actually saying?
Yes, I mean, we would recommend to the chief executive, and I think going back to my previous example of in the winter there are regular ward closures or stopping of admissions. The context of all of this was a very pressurised situation where intense scrutiny of the hospital, intense scrutiny of the staff, intense press speculation, and therefore it was particularly difficult for all parties, and I do commend the clinical teams for their real fortitude during that time. So in that context, I think it was important that the chief executive, who was briefing the Scottish Government at the time, would be party to that decision, given the magnitude of it.
Again, you may not be able to help us. On the same page, you're asked about circumstances in which you attended a meeting with clinicians who'd written to the chief executive and the director of medicine. First of all, a simple procedural question. Why was it you and Scott Davidson who were meeting with them, not Jane Grant and Dr. Armstrong?
Well, through the line management structure, myself as Chief Operating Officer and Scott Davidson as the Deputy Medical Director for Acute, where we were the next level from the Director for Women and Children's, the Chief of Medicine, Chief Nurse, etc. secondly, I have known the clinical team within that area, Dr. Gibson, Dr. Murphy, and colleagues for a long time, and also have a good working, or had a good working relationship prior to retirement. And I it's normal course of events. I would always, if asked, go and see clinicians, go and see groups of clinicians, and deal with any concerns or hear what concerns or frustrations they have. I think it's a normal part of a leadership role.
Well, I understand all of that. I think the relatively simple question is, I mean, this is relatively unusual. The clinicians had got together and written to the two people at the top of the heap. And the answer was, well, go and see Dr. Davidson and yourself.
Yeah.
Do you know why it was put down to the next level?
No, I think I don't think there's anything unusual in that, because I would expect the chief executive to say, some clinicians have written to me, or the medical director say to Dr. Davison, some clinicians have written to me, have they spoken to you, have you found out what it's about, etc., etc. So, and I'm sure that Mrs. Grant and Dr. Armstrong would have, and probably did, meet with the clinicians and did so if they thought it was appropriate.
And I noted from your answer that you really can't recall the precise details of the meeting you then had.
Well, I mean, like all of the issues that have been discussed, Dr. Gibson and her colleagues were frustrated and were working very, very hard, and were trying to do so in difficult circumstances, and wanted to see what was being done, how could we help them, and also partly to listen to their frustrations, because that's part of the role, because we're all in a team together to try and improve things.
Did you get any understanding of why they felt they'd had to take this perhaps not exactly common step of writing to the chief executive?
Probably because of the complexity of the situation and all the different issues that were occurring, but also probably because of the length of time that things were taking, simply because of the number of investigations that were going on into the building.
Can I ask you about a document that many other witnesses have been asked about, and I'll try and be as brief as I can. Can we have bundle 6, page 77, please? Now, this is the first page of a longish document. Yes. You remember, with lots of issues and lots of answers, some of which are repetitive or go back over similar ground, and I'm not going to ask you about the whole of it. Contains lots of information, including reference to a spike in infections in 2018 on the next page. But for my purpose, I wanted to ask you particularly just the one question. This is 2019. By 2019, you know, all the management know, because you've had reports and investigations and so on, that Ward 2A, leaving aside contractual issues, which we're not concerned with here, and I'm not going to get into, Ward 2A had not been built as you had hoped it would be built. It wasn't what you wanted, if I can put it that way.
Yes.
Is that fair?
Yes.
Am I not right in saying that that's the one thing you don't tell parents in this document, that it hadn't been built in the way you wanted it to be built?
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure why that wasn't the case. I can only think that investigations were not complete, or a full story had not been had come to light. But we tried very, very hard to work with the parents and families through various means, and that continued through the local management team working with them at all times. But it's something that I've not thought of before since you raised it there as a question, that the ward wasn't built as we anticipated.
Yeah, I mean, you're probably aware that there's been a bit of a debate about whether the word upgrade is really an accurate description for what was done to 2A. But leaving that aside, there's material in here about how much money you were spending on making this the best possible environment, which of course immediately leaves somebody to say, well, hang on, this is just a new hospital.
Yes.
How come you're just spending money now creating the best possible environment? And the answer to that is, well, we wanted it different, but it wasn't built in the way we wanted it. And that's not in here.
Right.
Do you know why?
I don't know why.
Because I think some involved in this inquiry would suggest that that means that this was not the full and transparent communication that they expected.
I think that's that. Just to comment on that, I think you'll see from the detail here, we tried at all times to give as much information as we possibly could given the circumstances, because it was a very challenging time. There was multidisciplinary teams involved in a range of issues. We had press interest, we had political interest, lots of pressures, but trying to focus on working with the families, because there's children and patients here that are really, really important in all this, which we tried to keep at the centre.
Can I ask you about an entirely different topic, please? Can we see, please, bundle 8, page 67? Now, this is an email thread which runs from pages 67 to 69. You just see at the top there's a reference to letting Jane and Jonathan know. And
Yes.
I think our assumption is that's probably you.
Yes.
Can we just scroll down just so we see exactly what's on here? And it's a reference to an IMT. Can you tell us, did Kevin Hill raise this issue with you?
I can't remember the details, but he would have, because we were in daily contact.
Do you know whether he raised it with Ms. Grant?
I couldn't answer that, I don't know.
Do you know why he would raise it with you?
Probably because of he reported to me at that time, and also we were on a daily basis supporting Kevin and his team and the clinicians to run the services. And as you can see, there were IMTs, there was investigations going on, and it was a very, very challenging time for everyone. And communication on a daily basis. I would be speaking to the chief executive many times during the day on various issues, and Kevin the same with myself in these particular circumstances. At other times he would go on with his operational role.
I suspect the reason it was flagged to you was that you see from the foot of page 68 that an infection known as Mycobacterium chelonae,
Yes.
which, without getting into the technicalities, is not a common or garden name that you see in reports, was found in a patient, and there was a previous patient, and it's a rare infection, says the note, and recent water samples have tested positive for it. Do you remember discussing this with Miss Grant?
I don't remember discussing it with Miss Grant.
Okay. Can we go to bundle 1, please, at page 330? Now, this is an IMT note, and we can scroll through it if you need to, but if you would just take it from me that includes a hypothesis. It says Mycobacterium chelonae cases, the group is working on the assumption that it is due to patients of leak staff having access to unfiltered water throughout the hospital. Now, I'm told, I'm asked to put to you that on Mr. Redfern, you remember who Mr. Redfern was,
Yes.
and his understanding of the threshold for engagement of a duty of candour at that point had been now reached. And did you have any role in telling the Cudahy family about this?
I don't recall that, no.
And do you know anything about it at all?
No, I would have been aware in my role, yes. But I believe at the time that Mr. Cudahy was in contact or was talking locally with the team, both the clinician in charge of his daughter's care and the Women and Children's Directorate team, Jen Rogers and Kevin Hill, etc., etc. They would be interacting on a regular basis.
Can we go to bundle 6 at page 75, please? Now, this is a letter from the chairman, sorry, the chief executive to Professor Cuddy on the 27th of September, a little bit later than the 3rd July meeting we were looking at. Do you remember being involved in the drafting of this letter?
I don't.
Now, do you not recall, or do you think you were, but you're not sure?
I probably would have seen it before it was sent out. I'm not sure at which time, but Mr. Cudahy preferred to deal with the board chief executive and the chairman on specific issues and on a daily basis in the ward with the ward team, the clinician, and as I said, Jen Rogers, the chief nurse, and Jamie Redfern.
Now, we know that, or we're told that by the 3rd of July, there seemed to be an indication that there should be communication with Professor Cuddy, and here we are at the end of September. Now, the reason given for the delay is said to be the need to wait for typing results and also patient confidentiality reasons. Are these good reasons for that delay?
Well, in terms of the typing results, that would be laboratories, and I don't know how long typing takes for a particularly unusual infection. That's not my area of expertise, so I can't comment on that. I'm sorry, what was the second?
Well, I think what I'm trying to raise as a question is, as you quite rightly said, these were difficult times. There seems to have been a decision somewhere around the beginning of July that somebody needs to tell Professor Cudahy.
Yes.
And here we are at the end of September. He's now being told. And I'm just wondering whether you had any view on the justification for that delay.
Well, any delay is terrible for a family if they don't know the full picture. And I know that the clinicians and the team worked hard to keep everyone informed, particularly the families. And there must have been a legitimate reason because normally we would turn these things around very quickly.
Mm-hmm. The other reason that had been mentioned for communicating in this way was that there was some concern that nobody else should speak to Professor Cudahy because it would cut across this communication route. That's not mentioned in the letter. Do you know why?
No, I don't recall any issues.
Thank you. I just want to ask you about another communication issue, if I can, one that I suspect you will indeed remember, and that's communications with two sisters called Armstrong.
Yes.
Now, if we go to 153 of your witness statement, we'll see in question 33, you're asked, what do you recall about the meeting? What concerns were raised? And then they quote, and I won't bother digging out the document, but just take it that's an accurate quote, that confidence in the management of the hospital is so damaged it's become very distressing to engage with it. And you're asked, were these concerns valid about what had happened? Now, your answer is, you've recalled the meetings are sensitive, they raised a number of issues. You don't tell us what they are, but they raised a number of issues, and it was particularly difficult. Now, I thought perhaps I'd missed your answer to, were they raising valid issues? What is the answer to that?
Well, I mean, that's a difficult question to answer. I always made myself available if families wanted to meet, if they had particular concerns. And I think in this occasion, as you can see, we had other people there. Absolutely, if a family feels concerned or has concerns that they believe have upset them or is distressing, then if they are valid, we will investigate them, we will look at them. And sometimes there are a number of issues. And it was particularly distressing for the Armstrong family because of the press situation, where the press were speculating, and also it was difficult because at that point the infections were being investigated. So absolutely, it's valid for them to be concerned and to raise issues. And I would hope families would do that and are still doing that if they are concerned.
Well, maybe a slightly different question. It's valid and appropriate for them to raise issues we can understand. Were the issues they raised valid ones?
I think some of them going through the response, the very long detailed response we gave to them following other meetings and the SCI, they were correct to raise and may have been valid, but these are very difficult situations and people have perceptions and feelings about things as they see them with their loved ones, and we have to be as sensitive to that as possible, and we have to try and respond to that as sensitively as possible and try and help and resolve these issues as they come up. And I thought it was very important to meet with the family and to go through these issues.
Page 154, please. The top of the page, you write, you apologise, which we know, and then you're asked, on reflection, how might this have been dealt with differently? Now, your answer is, in hindsight, I'm sure some aspects of the interaction with Ms. Armstrong could have been handled differently. But what could have been done differently?
Well, I think it was probably difficult for the Armstrong family because we didn't have as much information as we'd hoped to have to give them because there were still investigations going on. But in any situation or any meeting with a family, you have to reflect and see what you could have done better and what we could have done differently. And like anything else, I would reflect and say there probably would be things I would have done better. But again, we tried really hard to have a constructive discussion led by the family on their concerns.
Okay, well, the question in the questionnaire was, how could things have been done differently? Yeah. You've told us in the questionnaire answer things could have been done differently. Yeah. I was just wondering if you could tell us what these things might be.
Well, I can't answer that just now.
Now, I want to ask you about your approach to people who have concerns and so on. You're asked about what's been described as a 27-point action plan.
Yes.
Which arose from a meeting arising from a whistleblow. And you're asked about that and you answer it on page 157. Now, on 156, you're directed to a number of communications involving the others who were unhappy, Dr. Inkster and Dr. Peters, in particular when they were trying to resign from their roles and so on. So the first question I have to put to you is, does that not mean that you were aware when you were being asked about a meeting in October 2017, that a lot of the concerns about were people listening to us about the building, were people listening to us about the environment, go way back to 2015. We're aware of that.
I would have read the information because, as I say, I was director of the North Sector at the time when the resignations appeared.
Yeah. The reason I asked that is that on page 157, you're asked, is it fair to say that the 27-point action plan comes about as a direct consequence of this being taken to a whistleblow and a consequent meeting? And you say, well, that's a matter of opinion. And personally, you believe that staff should raise issues to the agreed line management processes within the NHS board, general management, professional management structures. Now, and you say line management and professional line management processes need to be followed to ensure resolution or not. Now, if you just read that as it stands,
Yep.
it sounds as if you're not an open supporter of people using whistleblowing.
No, I can categorically say that's not the case. What I personally felt about that particular issue is that I felt we had leapt, or the individuals had leapt to a confidential whistleblowing process before we had exhausted creating an action plan to solve the issues. And I suppose going back to your other point, the matrix management system means that, or is there because there's a professional line to the medical director for clinicians, there's a professional line to the director of nursing for the nurses, etc. And then there's the general management process where we work on the triumvirate system of manager, nurse and doctor running services. And my view is that we should go through the local groups, the local management processes, the directors, their respective chiefs of medicine and chief nurses, and then to chief operating officer, their level, and then to the board. In this instance, I think it was a bit strange that we were trying to resolve something, but over here there was a whistleblowing process, which there is a policy for, and is well used, and there's whistleblowing champions and a whole mechanism confidentially to deal with these issues. So I felt the two had got conflated at the time. But the important thing was to work through the concerns and come up with an action plan and solve the issues. I'm not sure, am I making myself...
No, I understand the point.
This is my personal opinion on it.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your answer. I think the point I was trying to ask was that although you may not have been in the post you were in 2017 and 2015, were you not aware that one of the complaints, essentially from the whistleblowers, was that they'd been shouting about this since 2015 and nothing was happening? And here you were in October 2017, and lo and behold, there's an action plan, and therefore the suggestion is made, and for your comment, well, is that not at least an indication that it took somebody to go to that stage to get things done? Well,
I can't comment on that previous time, but I think the meeting I attended was an attempt to get all the issues out on the table, create an action plan, and then deal with it. I can't comment on the passage of time because I wasn't involved in that previous discussions around it.
Would I be right in my recollection that to the extent that Dr. Redding was advised of the existence of the 27-point action plan, that was subsequent to the beginning of October 2017, or is my recollection wrong?
So I can't remember when the meeting actually was because Dr. Redding was at the meeting. So I do recall actually chatting to her after the meeting. So I can't quite remember when.
I think the top of page 157 says there was a meeting on the 4th of October 2017.
Yes. Yeah. So from that, the action plan was produced. Dr. Redding was at the meeting with a range of others, as seen, and that created the actions that various people were tasked to take forward.
That answer would be consistent with my memory that
Yes.
Dr. Redding was advised of an action plan subsequent
Yes,
to,
and
or rather no earlier than the 4th of April.
well, the meeting, I think the action plan was a result of the meeting.
Yeah.
And therefore we all, and Dr. Redding and others were there, and we all agreed the actions, and that was subsequently produced. And then, as I understand, each of the actions taken forward by the responsible person. But I remember Dr. Redding being at the meeting, and I had a chat with her afterwards.
Mr. Collins?
Can I look at 158? The question put to you, question 47, in your view, were Drs. Peters, Redding and the other microbiologists raising valid concerns? Answer, in my personal opinion, if the issues were raised and escalated via the agreed internal managerial and professional structure, yes, many of the concerns would have been dealt with at that time. Well, firstly, you haven't answered the question. Were these valid concerns? Well,
I wasn't involved in the original raising of their concerns. So I wouldn't know if they were valid or not, but I think, as I've said, I'm a firm believer in exhausting the agreed management and professional process before we get to whistleblowing or complaints, etc. And again, my philosophy has always been that we have a theme approach to things, and if folk are frustrated, there are people. So, for example, if I was in the chief operating officer role at that time, I would have anticipated someone coming to me saying, we're not happy, we've been through the local line management process, we've been through our local professional line management process, we're not getting anywhere, you're the next level, can you help with this?
So, knowing what you know now, I mean, who had failed to follow due process? Who are you suggesting?
I couldn't comment on that because I wasn't involved.
No. And you're not able to comment on whether the issues that were raised and discussed at the meeting you attended were valid ones?
Well, the issues that were raised at the meeting were real points of concern, and I think, like any organisation, and particularly in the NHS, the way we work is that a multidisciplinary team would come together, get the issues out from the people who'd raised them, who've all got different expertise, and would create an action plan. And actually make sure we follow the action plan through and resolve the situation, because at the end of the day, some of the issues are very important for patient care. So that's the way I would hope it would be done. Whether they were valid or not at the time, I cannot comment, because I've just come into the role as Chief Operating Officer.
You asked the same question again, as
Yes.
it happens later in this questionnaire, the foot of page 159. And you give the same answer that you've just given now. You can't, yes, comment on the clinical issues. But my focus, and when you see me say there, my focus at the top of page 160, my focus was at the meeting. My focus was in attempting to ensure that all parties involved worked through the agreed directorate general management structure and the professional reporting structure, i.e. not whistleblowing, going through this other process. Well, whistleblowing is always available to every employee if they feel that everything else is exhausted, and absolutely that has to be there. They also have trade unions, they also have professional bodies, and we have good working relationships with them. The board at the time had a whistleblowing champion, had senior people who were assigned to that role to meet people confidentially to deal with whistleblowing. My focus as the Chief Operating Officer for operational services across the whole of the site was to ensure that if people felt they could work through these processes and should work through these processes, and I assume and hope that people would do that. But if that's it, if that process is exhausted, there are other avenues to go, such as whistleblowing, trade unions, etc. And that's all part of the process. I just want to put it to you, because the inquiry has a fair bit of evidence about whistleblowing and what might or might not be needed if whistleblowing is to be effective, because
Yes.
as you probably know, it's been a topic at the various inquiries and other investigations. And if you have the chief operating officer turning up at a meeting with a main focus of trying to persuade everybody to go through what you see as proper procedure, would you agree that that could be at least perceived as discouraging the use of whistleblowing?
No, I mean, I think the phrase turning up at a meeting, no.
Well, sorry, I apologise. You were present at a meeting,
Yes.
and you were one of the most senior people
Yes,
there,
yes.
and your focus, as you say, was on making sure that people went through the proper, what you regarded as the proper structures.
Well, I think that's the side issue here. The side issue here was that we needed to get the appropriate expertise in the room to deal with all the issues that had been raised and create the action plan. So me turning up to the meeting is neither here nor there. It may have given it slightly more gravitas for us to get on with things, but that's the way we deal with things within the service. So I really need to make it clear that I'm a great supporter of the whistleblowing process and the staff side involvement in things. And in fact, I've been involved and was involved many years in staff side meetings, etc., etc. So this was a genuine attempt to get all of the issues out and get an action plan to move them forward, taking aside people's feelings about it. And if people then wanted to carry on with whistleblowing or with complaints or with the staff side, that's entirely open to people, and I fully respect that.
Maybe my fault. I haven't found anything in your statement that indicates you're a supporter of whistleblowing as a process. And the reason I say this, I want to take you almost finally to something you say in your conclusion, because what we usually do in these statements is, in case we've missed something or there's something very important that people want to say off their own bat, we say, is there anything else you want to add? And we find that at 169 of your witness statement. And you make, no doubt, extremely fair points about putting patients and families first, and how long ago some of these events are, and it's difficult to recall the detail, perfectly understand, but you don't have clinical or technical qualifications, and you've tried to build a team approach. And then you say, and I quote, "This has to be done through professional and general management accountability structures within the board government arrangements." Now, those are the words you've chosen to, as it were, sign off with.
Yes.
Which might suggest that that is your focus. You're not a whistleblowing champion at all. You would rather everybody just work through the system.
I don't. I'm sorry, Mr. Connell, but I am a supporter of the whistleblowing process and staff side and professional organisations. We all work together, and I'm sure if you asked any of my colleagues, they would tell you that about what type of leadership style I have, which was very inclusive, and also many people would come to my door. So I'm sorry to disagree with
No,
but I just really need to make that point because I feel quite strongly about it.
You're perfectly entitled to give us the evidence you want to give. That's the point of you being here. Can I ask you one question just while I'm on that page, just before I suspect we'll take a short break in a moment? Okay. You remember a thing called the case note review?
Yes.
Hardly likely to forget it.
Yes.
And they ultimately come up with a report which said that they thought about 30% of the cases were probably linked to the environment and a higher number were possibly linked. Do you remember that? Sorry, we know there was some toings and froings with the director of medicine about whether they'd made errors, and there was a response coming back saying yes or no to the various points that had been raised. But when it comes to the point that the report comes out, do you remember that being discussed at board level?
It may have been, and if there's minutes there, if it's been discussed, I presume it would be discussed at the, should definitely have been at the clinical governance committee or the care and clinical governance committees that then became known. But I would need to look at the, minutes and to see.
So you've no direct recollection of these discussions?
Yeah, it may have done, I'm not sure.
Thank you. Lord, I'm proposing, subject to your permission, to pause now. I'm told there may well be some questions in the room. And I'm just thinking that it might be appropriate to see if I can gather these together with a view to getting concluded.
Yes, Mr. Best, the procedure we're adopting is to give council an opportunity to check with his colleagues whether there are any additional questions that should be asked. So if I could invite you to go back to the witness room, and we should be able to resume either with further questions or otherwise in about 10 minutes.
Okay.
So if I could ask you to.
Thank you.
Please stand.
There are a modest number of questions, Lord.
We have some further questions, Mr. Bassett. Mr. Conn.
Couple of ones around patients first, if I may. We know you were involved in communications with the Armstrong sisters.
Yes.
And we've touched on that earlier today. And you said that one of the reasons that things were so difficult for them was the press coverage that was going on at the time. Now, were you aware that one of the reasons why they were upset with the press coverage is the press had described their mother as an elderly lady,
I remember that, yes.
and that information had actually come from the board's press officer?
That's correct.
So I suppose that the point is some of their distress at least was being caused by the board.
That could be an interpretation. I think my interpretation that the press team were probably trying to find a way of describing the patient without breaching any confidentiality, and that clearly caused offence, for which I think I apologised to the Armstrong family on the day, but clearly that's something we cannot change, and I accept that.
Another specific point, you remember I asked you about the paper that went out responding to the issues,
Yes,
and I was putting to you the point that nowhere in that paper do you put your hands up and say, we didn't get this built properly.
Mhm.
Now, it's been suggested to me that in letters which from time to time you would write to individual parents who had written in with concerns, you would use exactly the same phraseology about upgrading and spending lots of money, and would
Yes.
likewise not tell them that the reason you were doing all of this was it hadn't been built in the way that you wanted it. Is that correct?
I'm not sure that would be the motivation for the words that were used. I think what we were trying to reassure families who had some long associations with the hospital and indeed previous hospitals that we were tackling a problem and trying to upgrade facilities to make sure we can move people back in. So I don't recall us specifically avoiding saying that, or whether we had actually found the full facts out by then. So I can't properly answer that one for you.
Well, sorry.
There's my fault. I take from that answer you accept that in individual letters to patients' families, you did use the sort of terminology that Mr. Connell has drawn attention to. You make the point that you are not intentionally attempting to avoid anything, but you do accept that
Yes, I do.
terminology is
I do, my
used.
lord.
Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Connell.
Well, I'm going to suggest to you that by the time of the big release in 2019, and I'm told that at least one of these letters was early in 2020, the board had a lot of information as to what was not right with the ward. And it could be perceived, I'm going to suggest to you for your comment, could be perceived by parents that you were misleading them because you were not telling them why only a matter of a few years after it opened you were having to spend lots of money, quote, upgrading.
I don't accept I was misleading anyone. In fact, we always try to keep everyone informed, but I'm unable to answer the question, but I do not accept we were deliberately misleading anyone.
Can I ask you a slightly more technical question, which I hope you'll be able to answer in your position as a former Chief Operating Officer? Was there, at the time you took office in 2016, late on, a business continuity management plan covering the Schiehallion unit closure?
I'm unable to recall that.
Because I think the suggestion is there may not have been one initially, but there was one put in place later. Do you know anything about that?
I can't recall.
We touched on a little bit in one of the earlier questions this phrase duty of candour. Now, I accept you've made it clear you're neither technically qualified nor you're a clinician, but as a senior officer at the board at the time, what did you understand by the duty of candour incumbent on the board?
I mean, duty of candour is, I think, a very important issue, and particularly in wards and where patients have been treated, that if something goes wrong or there's a near miss, that we have a duty to inform the patients and their families, inform relatives, and advise them what happened. And that can take various levels of a consultant and speaking to a patient or a relative on a ward round saying this happened, or something happened to a medication dose or something, through to some more serious issues. So duty of candour is very important, and I think drives transparency for us in terms of how we do things. And sometimes that can be difficult given complex circumstances or complex issues.
Finally, I just want to come back to one question. Can we have 158 of the witness statement back, please? Sorry to have to come back to this, but it's clearly of particular concern to some who are represented here. At the top of page 158, you're asked the question, in your view, were Doctors Peters, Redding and other microbiologists raising valid concerns? And in fairness, you don't actually answer that question. Is that correct? You don't say yes or no to it.
That's correct, yes.
Now, I think you've said today you don't know.
Yeah, I think what I said today was that I wasn't involved at the time, but subsequently, I think the mechanism was put in place to deal with these concerns, hence the production of the action plan following the meeting that we had.
Now, does that not suggest that they were valid concerns?
Well, as I say, I'm unable to comment at the time if they're valid concerns. I was part of the solution to their concern. I'm sorry if I'm being.
Well, if I've understood your evidence,
Yeah.
The concerns were certainly being raised at the meeting with Dr. Redding on the 4th of October 2017. Now, I think you've confirmed to me that Dr. Redding wasn't told of any action plan prior to that, and indeed I have inferred from your answers that the action plan was prompted by Dr. Redding's concerns. Now, have I got all that right?
That's correct.
Right. Now, what Mr. Connell is, I think, raising is that the natural inference from that is that because the concerns were being responded to by action, that the board or the officers of the board regarded these concerns as valid. Now, is that not the inference to be drawn?
It is the inference, but the complexity of the issue for me is that, not the complexity, normally concerns when they're raised are dealt with. I think there were two parts to this. There were the actual issues that had to be dealt with and the concerns of Dr. Redding about the time taken and et cetera, to deal with these concerns. So I'm sorry for being.
Mr. Connell?
Well, I just really have one follow-up to this, if I may. We've got your response to that, and we'll consider it with all the other evidence. But if I just stick to 47, you were asked whether raising valid concerns. You didn't answer that question, and then you said, in my personal opinion, if the issues are raised and escalated via agreed procedures,
Yes.
they would have been sorted. Now, are you? I think I have to ask you to be clear. Are you suggesting that any of Drs. Peters, Redding, and the others had failed to follow procedures, and if so, what?
I don't know if they had, because I wasn't involved at the time. What I would have anticipated is that there would be as I described previously, a local management group that they are part of, and professional group, and then the next level being the management team for their particular area, and then to the senior team. I didn't see at the time any evidence of previous attempts to do that. That's what my assumption was, having come into the situation late. But the important thing for me was that the issues were addressed through the action plan, and we moved on.
I have nothing further, my lord.
Mr. Best, is the end of your evidence. Thank you for your attendance, and thank you for your work on your statement. You're now free to go.
Thank you very much. You're welcome.
Now, we will conclude for today. We resume on Tuesday with Mr. McIntosh and Miss Grant.
Correct.
Right. Well, can I wish everyone a good weekend?
Send.